I watched my mother smooth down my sister's hair one more time as they prepared to leave for Emma's piano recital, the same night as my choir's regional finals. You understand, don't you, Sophie? Mom said without looking at me. Emma's career is on the line. I understood perfectly. Just like I'd understood in my previous life, when I'd begged them to come, when I'd sobbed myself to sleep that night, when I'd watched Emma get everything while I got nothing. But this time, I had memories that stretched beyond death itself, and I knew exactly what was coming. Of course, I said, my voice steady. You should go support Emma. Mom blinked, surprised by my easy acquiescence. In the original timeline, I'd thrown a fit, had cried and screamed, which only made them more certain they were making the right choice. This time, I simply smiled and turned back to my room. Well, Dad said from behind his newspaper, at least one of our daughters is mature. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my heart pounding, not with sadness, but with anticipation. In my previous life, this night had been the beginning of the end. The night I'd sung my heart out to a half-empty auditorium, while my parents sat in a packed concert hall watching Emma butcher Chopin. The night I'd walked home alone in the rain. The night I'd decided I was done trying to make them see me. But I'd made so many mistakes back then. I'd been reactive, emotional, desperate for scraps of their attention. I'd let my hurt drive me to poor decisions, had dropped out of choir entirely after that night, had spiraled into depression and underperformance at school. By the time I was 25, I was working a dead-end job, still living in their basement, still watching Emma shine while I faded into the background. I'd died in a car accident on my way home from yet another humiliating family dinner where they'd announced Emma's engagement to a successful lawyer, and I'd been introduced as our other daughter. Then I'd woken up at 15, the morning of my first day of sophomore year, with every memory intact. I looked at myself in the mirror now, 15 again, but with the mind of a 25-year-old who'd learned bitter lessons about family and self-worth. My voice was just as good as it had been, maybe better without the years of neglect and self-doubt weighing it down. And this time, I knew exactly what to do with it. This time, I wouldn't beg for crumbs. This time, I would feast. The abuse had started young, though I don't think they would have called it that. To them, it was simply pragmatism, efficiency, making the smart investment. Emma was the firstborn, the golden child, the one who showed promise early. She'd started piano at 4 and displayed what our parents called exceptional talent. Looking back with adult eyes, I could see she was merely competent, but our parents had been young, ambitious, and eager to live vicariously through a prodigy daughter. When I came along 3 years later, I was an accident. Mom had said as much one night when she was drunk, thinking I was asleep on the couch. We weren't planning on another. She'd slurred to her sister over the phone. We'd already invested so much in Emma's training. Another child was just inconvenient timing. Inconvenient. That's what I was. An expense they hadn't budgeted for, a distraction from Emma's rising star. They'd done the minimum, fed me, clothed me, sent me to school. But the music lessons, the summer camps, the special schools, the attention, the pride, the love, that all went to Emma. When I showed interest in singing at age 7, Mom had sighed and said, "We can't afford lessons for both of you, Sophie. Emma's piano career is already established. Maybe you can join the school choir when you're older." So I did. I joined every choir I could, taught myself technique from YouTube videos, practiced in the bathroom when everyone was asleep. I poured everything into my voice because it was the one thing that was truly mine, that they hadn't touched or tainted with their favoritism. But it was never enough to make them see me. Emma's mediocre piano playing earned standing ovations at home. My solos earned distracted nods. Emma's 5th-place finish at a regional competition earned a celebratory dinner. My first-place win at the school talent show earned a "that's nice, dear," as Mom scrolled through her phone. The financial abuse was subtler but just as cutting. They paid for Emma's private lessons, her expensive piano, her sheet music, her performance dresses, her competition fees. When I asked for a microphone to practice with, Dad told me to save my allowance. When I mentioned wanting voice lessons, Mom said public school choir should be sufficient. When I needed a dress for my first concert, they gave me $50 and told me to find something at a thrift store, while Emma got custom gowns that cost hundreds. My college fund, which should have been equal to Emma's, was rated repeatedly to pay for her summer intensives at prestigious music schools. Emma's education is an investment, Dad had explained when I found out. She has real potential for a career. You're smart, Sophie. You'll get scholarships. Emma needs this support. I never got those scholarships. By the time I graduated high school in my first life, my grades had tanked from depression and lack of support. I'd quit choir after the regional finals disaster, had lost my passion, had watched Emma go off to Juilliard while I enrolled in community college. My college fund, what little remained, was eventually used to help Emma cover her apartment costs in New York. In my previous life, I'd discovered all this too late. I'd been 23 when I finally saw the bank statements, when I realized my parents had systematically drained every resource meant for me to prop up Emma's mediocre career. By then, Emma had already failed to launch professionally, had returned home with her expensive degree and no job prospects, and was living in the room that should have been mine while I slept in the basement. The emotional abuse was perhaps the worst. The constant comparisons, the dismissals, the way they lit up when Emma entered a room and dimmed when they saw me. The way they forgot my birthday 3 years in a row but threw Emma elaborate surprise parties. The way they had hundreds of photos of Emma on the walls and perhaps 3 of me, all from early childhood, before they'd decided I wasn't worth documenting. I remembered my mother's face the night I tried to tell her I was depressed, that I needed help. "Everyone feels sad sometimes, Sophie," she'd said, barely looking up from the video of Emma's latest recital. "You just need to try harder to be positive. Look at your sister. She works so hard and never complains." Emma, who had everything handed to her, who never had to work for affection or approval, who lived in a bubble of constant validation and support. Of course, she never complained. The worst part was that Emma herself was complicit. She'd grown up watching our parents favor her, and instead of feeling guilty or trying to even the scales, she'd leaned into it. She'd learned that she could get whatever she wanted by playing the struggling artist, the sensitive musician who needed special treatment. She'd learned to weaponize our parents' favoritism against me. When we were 13 and 10, I'd won a part in the school musical, my first real recognition. Emma had immediately started complaining about stress and anxiety, had claimed she needed the family's full support for an upcoming competition. Our parents had forbidden me from doing the musical because the rehearsal schedule would disrupt Emma's practice time with the house noise. When I was 16 in my first life, I'd been offered a scholarship to a summer music intensive program, a rare opportunity that I'd earned entirely on my own merit. Emma had thrown a fit, claiming it wasn't fair that I got special treatment when she'd been working so much harder for so much longer. Our parents had made me turn it down and had sent Emma to an expensive program instead, using the money from my college fund. Again and again, Emma had sabotaged me with our parents' full support. And I'd been too young, too desperate for their love to see it for what it was. Systematic destruction of my potential to prop up her ego. I'd died angry and small, having never achieved anything, having never escaped their shadow. I'd died knowing Emma was about to marry well and finally achieve the success our parents had always predicted for her, while I remained the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the daughter they never quite knew what to do with. But death had given me a gift: clarity, distance, and a second chance. I woke up at 15 with all my memories intact, with the knowledge of every mistake I'd made, every opportunity I'd missed, every moment I'd wasted begging for love from people who would never give it. I woke up 3 months before the regional choir finals that had broken me the first time around. And I woke up with one more thing: knowledge of exactly how good my voice actually was. In my first life, I'd never really pushed myself. I'd been too beaten down, too convinced by my family that I wasn't special, that my singing was just a hobby, nothing serious. But in those moments before I died, in that strange clarity that comes with mortality, I'd finally understood. I'd been extraordinary all along. The summer intensive I'd turned down had sent scouts to our school specifically looking for me. The choir director had tried multiple times to get me private lessons, had offered to pay for them herself. There had been a recording industry executive in the audience at one of my concerts, and I'd never known because I'd been too depressed to follow up, too convinced nothing would come of it. I'd had a gift, a real one, not the manufactured kind our parents had projected onto Emma, and I'd let them convince me it was worthless. This time would be different. This time I would let them make their choice, and I would make mine. The 3 months between my rebirth and the regional finals were the most productive of both my lives. I worked with a focus and determination born of having already lived through the alternative. Every decision was calculated, every move strategic. First, I started documenting everything. Every slight, every broken promise, every dollar they spent on Emma while denying me. I kept a journal, time-stamped and detailed. I saved text messages. I recorded conversations on my phone when they were particularly damning. In my first life, I'd never thought to protect myself legally or financially. This time, I was building a case. Second, I reached out to every resource I'd ignored or missed the first time around. I emailed Mrs. Chen, my choir director, and asked about the private lessons she'd once offered. She was delighted and began coaching me twice a week after school, refusing payment but accepting my help reorganizing the choir room as trade. She'd been a professional opera singer before teaching, and she taught me things I'd never learned in my first life. Proper breathing technique, how to protect my voice, how to perform with confidence. Sophie, Ais, she said after our third lesson, her eyes shining. You have something special. Truly special. I've taught for 20 years, and I've only met maybe 3 students with your natural gift. Please promise me you'll pursue this seriously. I will, I told her. I promise. Third, I did something I'd been too proud to do in my first life. I got a part-time job. I started working at a local coffee shop on weekends, saving every penny. The money wasn't for lessons or dresses. Mrs. Chen had that covered. The money was for my escape fund for the life I was going to build away from my family. Fourth, and most crucially, I prepared for the regional finals like they were the Olympics. Mrs. Chen helped me select a piece that would showcase my range and emotional depth. O mio babino caro. The same aria I'd sung in my first life, but this time with proper technique and real understanding of the lyrics. I practiced until my voice was muscle memory, until I could sing it perfectly, even when emotional, even under pressure. Because I knew what was coming. I knew that this competition would have scouts in the audience. I knew that Marcus Richardson, a talent agent who specialized in developing young classical crossover artists, would be there looking for his next client. In my first life, he'd approached me after my performance, had given me his card, had told me I had real potential. And I'd been so devastated by my parents' absence, so broken by years of neglect, that I'd thrown the card away and quit choir 2 weeks later. This time, I would be ready for him. The day of the competition, I woke up calm. I packed my dress, a beautiful emerald gown that Mrs. Chen had helped me find at a consignment shop, fitted it myself using YouTube tutorials, and that made me look like I belonged on a professional stage. I did my own makeup, having practiced for weeks. I packed my music, my water bottle, my lucky charm, a small bird figurine I'd bought with my first paycheck, a reminder that I was going to fly free. At breakfast, Emma was a bundle of nerves about her piano recital. Mom was fussing over her, making her special food, talking about how important tonight was. Dad was on his phone, coordinating with other parents about the best seats at Emma's venue. I ate my cereal in silence, waiting. Finally, Emma looked at me. Isn't your choir thing tonight too? Yes, I said simply. Oh. She blinked, then turned to Mom. Mom, you're coming to my recital, right? You have to be there. Of course, sweetie, Mom said immediately. Your father and I wouldn't miss it for the world. They didn't even look at me. Didn't ask about my competition. Didn't acknowledge the conflict. In my first life, I'd had to bring it up myself, had to beg and plead. This time, I just let the silence stretch. Finally, Dad glanced up. Sophie, you understand we need to be there for your sister, right? This is a very important night for her career. I understand perfectly, I said. And I did. I understood that this was who they were, who they'd always been, who they would always be, and I was finally okay with it. Good, Mom said, relieved. I'm glad you're being mature about this. I smiled and finished my cereal. At school that day, I told Mrs. Chen that my parents wouldn't be coming. She looked angry. She'd seen how they treated me over the past months, had started to understand the family dynamics, but she just hugged me tight. Their loss, she said firmly. You're going to be magnificent tonight, with or without them. She was right. The auditorium was packed. The regional finals brought in families from 6 different schools, and every seat was filled. I stood backstage, warming up my voice, feeling the familiar pre-performance nerves that were actually excitement in disguise. I wasn't thinking about my parents. I wasn't wondering if they'd change their minds, if they'd show up at the last minute. In my first life, I'd spent the entire competition scanning the audience for their faces, hoping against hope that they'd come. This time, I knew they wouldn't. This time, I didn't need them to. When my name was called, I walked onto that stage with my head high. The lights were bright, the audience was a sea of faces, and I felt powerful in a way I'd never felt in my first life. I wasn't the girl begging for scraps anymore. I was the girl who'd died and been reborn, who knew her worth, who was about to show everyone what they'd been missing. I nodded to the pianist, took a breath, and began to sing. The aria poured out of me like liquid gold. Every lesson with Mrs. Chen, every hour of practice, every ounce of pain from my first life, it all channeled into my voice. I sang about a daughter pleading with her father, and I made it mean something. I sang about love and desperation and the ache of not being seen, and every person in that audience felt it. I wasn't just performing. I was exorcising demons. I was rewriting history. I was claiming my power. When I hit the final note, clear, pure, sustained, impossibly long, the auditorium was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then the applause erupted like thunder. People stood. Some were crying. Mrs. Chen was weeping openly in the front row. I curtsied and walked off stage, my heart pounding, and I knew this was it. This was the moment my life truly began. I won first place, unsurprisingly. The judges' scores were unanimous and their comments were glowing. A once-in-a-generation voice, one wrote. Star quality, said another. Reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place, wrote the third. But the real prize came after the awards ceremony when a well-dressed man in his 40s approached me with a business card. Sophie Martinez, he said, extending his hand. Marcus Richardson, Richardson Talent Management. That was one of the most incredible performances I've seen in 20 years of attending these competitions. I'd love to talk to you about representation. In my first life, I'd been too broken to hear him properly, too focused on the fact that my parents hadn't come, too beaten down to believe I deserved this. This time, I looked him directly in the eye and said, I'd love to hear more. What exactly are you offering? We talked for 30 minutes in the lobby while other families celebrated around us. Marcus explained that he specialized in classical crossover, young artists with classical training who could bridge into pop, musical theater, and recording. He named several of his current clients, all of whom had successful careers. He explained his process: development, training, strategic positioning, and then, when the artist was ready, introduction to record labels. I'll be honest with you, Sophie, he said. You're young, and you'd need a few more years of development before you're ready for a major label deal. But you have something special, not just the voice, but the presence, the emotional connection. If you're willing to work with me, I can help you build a real career. Not overnight, but the right way. What about school? I asked. My education? You'd finish high school, he said immediately. That's non-negotiable. I don't work with dropouts. But we'd add voice lessons, performance coaching, maybe some session work, and small gigs to build your experience. Think of it as a parallel track, student by day, developing artists by evening and weekends. And costs? My agency takes 15% when you start earning. Until then, I invest in you, lessons, coaching, opportunities. If you don't succeed, I eat the cost. That's how much I believe in you. I pretended to think about it, but I already knew my answer. In my first life, this moment had slipped through my fingers. In this life, I was catching it with both hands. I'm interested, I said, but I need to discuss it with my parents first. Marcus nodded, understanding. Of course, have them call me. He handed me his card, the same card I'd thrown away the first time around. I'll be in touch next week to follow up, but Sophie, don't let anyone talk you out of this. You're the real thing. I clutched the card like a lifeline and promised I wouldn't. Mrs. Chen drove me home that night, both of us giddy with victory. I'm so proud of you, she kept saying. So incredibly proud. When I got home at 10:30, my parents were already back. sitting in the living room with Emma, watching a recording of her recital. They barely looked up when I walked in. "How was your concert?" Mom asked absently, eyes on the screen. "I won first place," I said. "And I was approached by a talent agent who wants to represent me." That got their attention. Dad actually paused the video. "What?" I held up Marcus's card. Marcus Richardson, one of the top talent managers for classical crossover artists. He said I have a once-in-a-generation voice and wants to help me build a professional career. For a moment, I saw something flicker across their faces. Surprise, maybe even regret. But then Emma spoke up. "That's nice, Sophie," she said with saccharine sweetness. "But you know those people approach everyone at competitions, right? It's just their sales pitch. They probably told all the winners the same thing." "Actually," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Emma's right, honey. We don't know anything about this person. It's probably a scam." "We can look him up," I said calmly. "Yes, son? He has a website, established clients, a reputation." "Sophie," Dad said with heavy patience. "Wait, appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to be realistic. You're 15. You have school to focus on. This singing thing is a nice hobby, but we can't afford to invest in another music career right now. Emma's education is already expensive enough." There it was. The same dismissal, the same prioritization, the same casual destruction of my dreams. In my first life, this had been the killing blow. I'd screamed and cried and accused them of favoritism, which only made them more certain I was being childish and unrealistic. This time, I just smiled. "Okay," I said softly. "I understand." They blinked, surprised by my acquiescence, just like they'd been surprised that morning. "Well," Mom said carefully, "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this." "Can we finish watching my recital now?" Emma asked, already bored with my moment. "Of course, sweetie," Dad said, pressing play. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and pulled out my phone. I didn't call Marcus, not yet. Instead, I pulled out the journal where I'd been documenting everything, and I made a detailed entry about tonight. Their absence from my competition, their dismissal of Marcus's offer, their immediate return to Emma's recital video. Then I opened my laptop and started researching emancipation laws in our state. I'd been quietly looking into this for weeks, understanding that eventually I'd need to legally separate from my parents to pursue my career without their interference. I was 15 now. In 2 years, I could potentially file for emancipation if I could prove I was self-sufficient and that it was in my best interest. 2 years. I could wait 2 years. I'd already waited a lifetime. The next morning, I called Marcus from school during lunch. "My parents think it's a scam," I told him honestly. "They won't support it." I heard him sigh. "That happens sometimes. Usually with parents who don't understand the industry." "Look, Sophie, I can't work with you without parental consent. You're a minor, but that doesn't mean we can't stay in touch. When you turn 18 or if your parents change their minds, my door's open. In the meantime, keep training, keep performing, keep building your skills. Don't let this stop you." "I won't," I promised. "And Marcus, thank you for believing in me." "It's not belief, kid. It's recognition. You have it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After I hung up, I sat in the empty choir room and made a new plan. If I couldn't sign with Marcus now, I'd prepare for when I could. I'd keep working with Mrs. Chen, keep saving money, keep documenting my parents' neglect. I'd build my case for emancipation, brick by brick. And when the time came, I'd walk away from them completely, not in anger or desperation like I'd done in my first life, but with strategy and strength. I'd let them think they'd won, and then I'd show them exactly what they'd lost. The next 2 years were a masterclass in patience and planning, while my parents continued to pour resources into Emma's mediocre piano career. I built my own empire in secret. I kept working at the coffee shop, eventually becoming a shift supervisor with a decent hourly wage. Every paycheck went into a savings account my parents didn't know about, building my escape fund. By my 17th birthday, I had nearly $15,000 saved. I continued lessons with Mrs. Chen, who had become not just my teacher, but my mentor and advocate. She connected me with a friend who taught at a nearby college, and I started taking advanced vocal technique classes as a special student on scholarship. My skills grew exponentially. I performed everywhere I could: school concerts, community theater, local competitions, church services. I built a repertoire, a performance reel, a growing reputation in the local music community. I created a YouTube channel where I posted performance videos, and slowly, steadily, I grew a following. Nothing massive, but enough to show I had audience appeal. I maintained contact with Marcus Richardson through email, updating him on my progress. He sent encouragement, advice, and occasionally opportunities for small gigs that didn't require parental consent, background vocals for local recording sessions, participation in showcase concerts. Nothing paid much, but it all built my resume and my confidence. I kept my grades up, not for my parents, but for myself. I'd need good grades for college scholarships, for the day when I'd need to prove to a judge that I was responsible and mature enough for emancipation. And most importantly, I documented everything. Every time my parents missed a concert of mine to attend one of Emma's. Every time they paid for Emma's expenses while telling me to use my own money. Every conversation where they dismissed my dreams and elevated Emma's. I had journals, recordings, saved text messages, even testimony from Mrs. Chen and other teachers about my parents' absence from my life. I watched Emma continue her mediocre trajectory. She was good enough to get into a decent music school, but not good enough to be truly competitive. She'd stopped improving around 16, had started coasting on our parents' praise and support. She was going to graduate high school and go to a mid-tier conservatory on our parents' dime, and she'd eventually realize that the real world didn't care about her the way our parents did. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But mostly, I watched my parents. I watched them mortgage their house to pay for Emma's audition tour of music schools. I watched them raid my college fund completely, leaving me with nothing. I watched them celebrate Emma's acceptance to a $60,000 per year conservatory while suggesting I consider community college. In my first life, this would have destroyed me. In this life, it freed me. Every choice they made pushed me further from them emotionally and strengthened my case legally. The day I turned 17 and a half, the earliest I could file for emancipation in our state, I made my move. I'd been working with a family lawyer who did pro bono cases for youth advocacy. I'd approached her 6 months earlier, explained my situation, shown her my documentation. She'd been appalled by what I'd shown her and had agreed to take my case. The petition for emancipation was filed on a Tuesday morning. My parents were served with papers at dinner that night. The explosion was spectacular. "What the hell is this?" Dad roared, waving the papers. "A petition for emancipation," I said calmly. "I'm seeking legal independence from both of you." "You can't do that," Mom said, her face pale. "You're a child. You live in our house." "I'm 17 and a half. I have steady employment and savings, and I can demonstrate both financial independence and that emancipation is in my best interest. I have a hearing in 3 weeks." "This is insane," Emma said from her spot at the table. "Why are you being so dramatic?" I turned to her slowly. "Dramatic? Emma, our parents have spent over $200,000 on your music education while giving me nothing. They've missed every important event in my life for the past 3 years while attending all of yours. They drained my college fund to pay for your conservatory auditions. This isn't drama. This is survival. We've given you a home, food, clothes," Dad spluttered. "We've given you everything you need." "You've given me the legal minimum required to avoid neglect charges," I said, pulling out my documentation folder. "Which is why I have 3 years of records showing the disparity in treatment, financial abuse, and emotional neglect, which my lawyer is very excited to present to the judge." Mom's face crumpled. "How can you do this to us? We're your parents." "No," I said quietly. "You're Emma's parents. You made that choice years ago. I'm just making it legal." The 3 weeks before the hearing were tense. My parents tried everything: guilt trips, threats, sudden shows of affection and interest, promises to change. Emma cried and said I was tearing the family apart. They told extended family I was being rebellious and ungrateful, trying to poison my relationships. But I'd expected all of this. I'd lived through worse in my first life, and I had the emotional distance of someone who'd already mourned this family once. Their attempts to manipulate me slid off like water off glass. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. My lawyer presented my documentation methodically, bank statements showing the financial disparity, my work records showing stable employment, testimony from Mrs. Chen about my maturity and independence, my academic records showing I maintained good grades without parental support, and finally, the painful evidence of years of neglect and favoritism. My parents' lawyer argued that they'd provided for me, that all families had different dynamics, that this was normal sibling rivalry blown out of proportion, but the judge saw through it. She was a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen cases like mine before, and she read through my journals with an increasingly grim expression. "I'm granting the petition," she said finally. "Ms. Martinez has demonstrated both the ability to support herself and clear evidence that emancipation is in her best interest. Furthermore, I'm troubled by what appears to be systematic financial abuse and emotional neglect. This is not normal sibling rivalry. This is a family that has chosen to invest in one child at the complete expense of another." She turned to my parents. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. You have an extraordinarily talented daughter who achieved success despite your neglect, not because of your support. You don't deserve her." The gavel came down. Just like that, I was free. I moved out that weekend into a small studio apartment I'd already scouted and put a deposit on. Mrs. Chen helped me move my few belongings. I didn't take much, didn't want much from that house. I took my clothes, my music, my journals, and my bird figurine. Everything else could stay in the past where it belonged. My parents tried one last time at the door. "Sophie, please," Mom said, crying. "Don't do this. We can fix this. We'll do better." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but tired pity. "You're not upset that you hurt me," I said quietly. "You're upset that I'm not staying to let you keep hurting me. There's a difference." "What about college?" Dad demanded. "How will you pay for it?" "The same way I've paid for everything else in my life," I said. "By myself." I walked away and didn't look back. Being emancipated at 17 was both terrifying and exhilarating. I was legally an adult, responsible for everything: rent, utilities, food, healthcare, taxes. But I was also free in a way I'd never been before, even in my previous life. The first thing I did was call Marcus Richardson. "I'm emancipated," I told him. "I can sign contracts. Are you still interested?" His laugh boomed through the phone. "Sophie Martinez, I have been waiting for this call for 2 years. Come to my office tomorrow. Let's talk about your future." The meeting was everything I'd hoped for. Marcus had kept track of my progress, had watched my YouTube videos, had heard about my performances through his network. He'd also heard about my emancipation. Apparently, the story had spread through the local music community, and I'd become something of a cause célèbre. "You're exactly where I hoped you'd be," he said, reviewing my performance reel. "You've grown tremendously as a vocalist, you've built an audience, and you've demonstrated the kind of work ethic and determination that makes for a lasting career. I think you're ready for the next level." "Which is?" I asked. "Recording. I have connections with a boutique label that specializes in classical crossover and new artists. They're always looking for fresh talent with an existing audience base. I'd like to get you an audition." My heart nearly stopped. "An audition with a record label?" "Not a major label," he cautioned. "This is an independent, smaller operation. But they do good work, they treat their artists well, and they have solid distribution. It would be a development deal. They'd invest in producing a few singles, maybe an EP, see how the market responds. If it goes well, they'd fund a full album. Think of it as a stepping stone to bigger things." I thought about my first life, where I died having achieved nothing, having never even tried for my dreams. I thought about the girl who'd been too broken by her family to seize this opportunity the first time around. "When's the audition?" I asked. "Next month. I'll coach you, help you prepare. You'll need to perform 2 pieces, one classical, one more contemporary. Show your range." "And Sophie?" He leaned forward, serious. This is a real shot. Don't let it psych you out. You're good enough. You've always been good enough. Now you just need to show them. The next 4 weeks were a blur of preparation. Marcus connected me with a vocal coach who specialized in audition prep. We refined my technique, selected my pieces, O mio babino caro for the classical, and a stripped-down version of Hallelujah for the contemporary. We worked on stage presence, on talking about my story, on selling not just my voice but my brand. I kept working at the coffee shop to pay my bills, practiced late into the night, survived on minimal sleep and maximum determination. I was tired, stressed, running on fumes, and I'd never been happier. Because I was doing this, actually doing it, chasing the dream my parents had told me was impossible, building the career they'd said was unrealistic, becoming the person they'd never believed I could be. The audition was in a small recording studio in downtown LA, a 2-hour drive from my apartment. Marcus drove me, talking the whole way about staying calm, trusting my preparation, remembering that they wanted me to succeed. They're looking for someone, he reminded me. They need a new artist. You could be that person. Just show them who you are. The label executives were a small team. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to my Mrs. Chen, a younger A&R rep named James, and a sound engineer named Marcus, different Marcus. They were friendly but professional, asking about my background, my training, my goals. I told them an edited version of the truth, that I'd been training seriously for years, that I'd recently gained independence to pursue music full-time, that I wanted to build a career in classical crossover. I didn't mention the abuse, the emancipation, the rebirth. That was my story, not theirs. Then I sang. I poured everything into those 2 songs, all the pain of my first life, all the triumph of my second, all the determination and hope and rage and joy that lived in my 17-year-old body. I sang like I'd sung at the regional finals, but better, more mature, more controlled. I sang like someone who knew exactly what she was worth. When I finished, there was silence. Then Patricia Chen smiled. Well, she said, I think we found our new artist. The contract negotiations took 3 weeks. Marcus advocated fiercely for me, ensuring I got fair terms, retained creative control, and wasn't locked into anything exploitative. The final deal was modest but fair. They'd fund recording and production for an EP of 5 songs, with options for future albums based on performance. I'd get a small advance, royalties on sales and streams, and support for marketing and distribution. I signed the contract 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. We started recording immediately. The label paired me with a producer who specialized in classical crossover, and we worked to create a sound that honored my classical training while appealing to contemporary audiences. We recorded 4 originals and 1 cover, each song carefully selected to showcase different aspects of my voice and artistry. The title track was called Phoenix Rising, a song I'd co-written about rebirth, about rising from ashes, about becoming who you were meant to be. It wasn't subtle, but it was honest, and it resonated. The EP was scheduled to release in 6 months, timed to coincide with a small tour of intimate venues where I'd be opening for more established artists. Marcus was already booking performances, getting me on local radio shows, building buzz. Everything was happening. Everything I'd dreamed of, worked for, died for was finally coming true. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Emma. I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. As far as I was concerned, they'd made their choice years ago, and I'd made mine at the emancipation hearing. We were done. But word travels in the music community, and eventually they found out. The call came from Mrs. Chen 6 months after my emancipation, the week before my EP was set to release. I was in my apartment going over final tour details with Marcus when my phone rang. Sophie, Mrs. Chen said, her voice careful. I thought you should know your parents came to see me today. They're asking about you. I felt my stomach tighten. What did they want? They heard through someone that you've signed with a record label. They wanted to know if it was true, if I knew how to contact you. Sophie, they seemed, I don't know, upset, regretful. Your mother was crying. Good, I said flatly. What did you tell them? That I couldn't give out your information without your permission. that you were doing well, and that's all they needed to know. But Sophie, I think you should prepare yourself. They're going to try to find you. She was right. Over the next week, I got messages from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all with variations of the same theme. Your parents are heartbroken. Family is important. They just want to reconnect. You should forgive them. I had ignored all of them. I'd learned in my first life that people who hadn't lived through the abuse would never understand it, would always prioritize the appearance of family unity over actual justice and healing. Their opinions didn't matter. What did matter was my EP release, which was now just 3 days away. Marcus had arranged for a launch party at a small venue in LA. Nothing huge, just industry people, press, friends, and supporters. Mrs. Chen was coming, along with some of my former classmates who'd supported me over the years. It was going to be intimate, celebratory, the perfect start to this new chapter. The night of the launch party, I put on a black dress I'd bought with my first advance payment, did my makeup carefully, and looked at myself in the mirror. I was 18 now, legally and fully an adult. I was a signed recording artist. I was independent, successful, and free. I was everything my parents had told me I couldn't be. The venue was beautiful, dim lighting, a small stage, tables scattered around for mingling. People were already arriving when I got there, industry folks I'd met through Marcus, music journalists, local musicians who'd supported me. Mrs. Chen was there, beaming with pride, and she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So incredibly proud." Marcus gave a short speech introducing me, talking about my journey, my talent, my future. Then I took the stage and performed 3 songs from the EP, including Phoenix Rising. The response was electric. People weren't just politely clapping, they were moved, engaged, excited. After my performance, I was swarmed with people wanting to talk, congratulate, network. A music journalist asked for an interview, a radio DJ wanted me on his show, a blogger asked if she could write a feature. This was it. This was the launch. This was my life beginning for real. I was talking to a producer about potential collaboration when the doors at the back of the venue opened and my parents walked in. Time seemed to slow. I saw them scan the room, saw the moment they spotted me, saw my mother's hand go to her mouth. They'd dressed up, my dad in a suit, my mom in a cocktail dress, like they were invited guests instead of uninvited ghosts from a past I'd left behind. Emma wasn't with them, I noted. Probably at school, at her conservatory, living the life they'd bought her. I excused myself from the conversation and walked toward them, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Marcus saw them too and moved to intercept, but I shook my head. This was mine to handle. "Sophie," Mom said when I reached them, her eyes already filling with tears. "Honey, you look beautiful. We heard about your album." "EP," I corrected coldly, son. "And what are you doing here?" "We wanted to support you," Dad said. He looked older than I saw. Remembered, more tired. "We heard about tonight and we thought we wanted to be here for this." "Now you want to be here?" I kept my voice low, controlled, aware that people were watching. After missing every important night of my life? After telling me my music career was a scam? After spending my college fund on Emma? Now you want to support me? "We made mistakes," Mom said, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. "We know that now. We were wrong to favor Emma, wrong to dismiss your talent. We see that now. Can't you forgive us?" I studied them both. These people who'd given me life but had never really seen me. Who'd raised me but had never really known me. Who'd had 2 chances at being my parents and had failed both times. "Did Emma not work out?" I asked quietly. "Is she not the star you thought she'd be? Is that why you're here now, because your golden child failed to launch and suddenly you're interested in the daughter who succeeded despite you?" Dad flinched. Bull's eye. "It's not like that," he started, but I cut him off. "Yes, it is. Emma's at a 3rd-tier conservatory struggling to make friends because she's used to being the best without working for it. She's going to graduate with massive debt and no real prospects because she's good but not great. Trained but not passionate. And you're just now realizing that you bet on the wrong horse." "Don't talk about your sister like that." Mom said, but there was no real fire in it. She's not my sister anymore, I said. She stopped being my sister when she stood by and watched you destroy me for her benefit. You're not my parents anymore. You're strangers who share my DNA, that's all. Sophie, please, Dad said. We want to make this right. We want to be part of your life. We want to support your career. I don't need your support. I never needed it. I built this myself without you, in spite of you. I gestured around the room, at the party, at my success. This is what I did while you were busy with Emma. This is what happens when you bet on yourself instead of waiting for parents who will never choose you. Marcus had made his way over, along with Mrs. Chen. They flanked me protectively, and I felt a surge of gratitude for my chosen family, the people who'd actually been there. I think you should leave, Marcus said firmly to my parents. This is a private event, and you weren't invited. We're her parents, Mom protested weakly. No, Ms. Chen said, her voice hard. Parents show up. Parents support their children. Parents don't drain college funds and miss competitions and dismiss dreams. You're not her parents. You're her donors. There's a difference. Security was already moving toward us, summoned by Marcus's signal. My parents looked between all of us, and I saw the moment they realized they'd lost, that there was no coming back from this, no reconciliation, no happy ending where we all forgave and forgot. I hope you're happy, Dad said, his voice bitter. I hope destroying this family was worth it. I didn't destroy this family, I said quietly. You did years ago when you decided Emma was worth more than me. I just stopped pretending it didn't happen. I just chose myself over you. And yes, it was absolutely worth it. They left, escorted by security, and the room gradually returned to celebration. People came up to me, asked if I was okay, offered support. I assured them I was fine, better than fine, and after a few minutes, the party regained its momentum. But inside, I felt something shift and settle. I'd faced them, the people who'd broken me in my first life, who'd tried to break me in this one, and I'd stood my ground. I'd let them see what they'd lost, and then I'd let them go. Later that night, after the party, Mrs. Chen drove me home. We didn't talk much, but as I got out of the car, she caught my hand. You did good tonight, she said. Not just with your parents, but with everything. I'm proud of who you've become. I couldn't have done it without you, I told her honestly. You were there when they weren't. You believed in me when they didn't. You're more family to me than they ever were. She hugged me tight, and when we pulled apart, we were both crying. I went up to my apartment, took off my fancy dress, and sat by the window looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, my EP would release to the world. Tomorrow, I'd start doing interviews, radio appearances, preparing for the tour. Tomorrow, my real career would begin. But tonight, I let myself feel the weight of everything. 2 lifetimes of pain and triumph, death and rebirth, loss and gain. I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life, broken and small, convinced she was worthless, because that's what her family had told her. I thought about the woman I was now, strong and free, built from the ashes of that girl's death. I thought about my parents, driving home to a house that must feel emptier now, realizing too late what they'd had and what they'd thrown away. I thought about Emma, who'd probably hear about tonight, who'd have to face the fact that the sister she'd dismissed and diminished had surpassed her. And I felt nothing but peace. The EP released at midnight. By morning, Phoenix Rising had been streamed 50,000 times. By the end of the week, it had hit 500,000, and music blogs were calling me the next big thing in classical crossover. By the end of the month, the EP had gone to number 3 on the classical crossover charts, and Marcus was fielding offers for bigger venues, festival appearances, and potential major label interest. My tour started small, opening slots at intimate venues, performing for crowds of a few hundred, but it grew quickly. By the 3rd month, I was headlining small theaters, selling out shows, building a dedicated fan base. My YouTube channel exploded, going from a few thousand subscribers to 500,000. Social media was flooded with videos of my performances, fan covers of my songs, people sharing their stories of overcoming family adversity. I became, somewhat unexpectedly, a symbol not just of musical talent, but of choosing yourself, of walking away from toxicity, of building yourself despite obstacles. People connected with my story, with my music, with the emotion I poured into every performance. Journalists wanted to interview me about my emancipation, about my family. I was careful with what I shared. I talked about the experience in general terms, about overcoming adversity, about the importance of believing in yourself. But I didn't trash my parents publicly, didn't air all the specific grievances. That wasn't who I wanted to be, and it wasn't the story I wanted to tell. My story was about triumph, not bitterness, about rising, not revenge. 6 months after the EP release, Patricia Chen called me into her office. "We want to offer you a full album deal," she said, sliding a contract across her desk. "But we're not the only ones. Sony has expressed interest, so has Atlantic. You're hot right now, Sophie. You have options." I looked at the contract, at Patricia's expectant face, and I thought about what I wanted. A major label would mean more resources, more reach, more pressure, more compromise. An independent label would mean more control, more artistic freedom, slower but more sustainable growth. In my first life, I would have jumped at the major label offer, desperate for validation, for the biggest possible success. But I'd learned patience in this life, had learned to value sustainability over spectacle. "I want to stay with you," I told Patricia. "Major labels can wait. Let's build this the right way." She smiled. Smart choice. The album took 8 months to create. We worked with incredible producers, songwriters, and musicians, crafting something that felt authentic and ambitious. It was called Rebirth. And while only I understood the full meaning, everyone who heard it understood the emotion. It released on my 19th birthday, a gift to myself, a celebration of 2 years of freedom, of life rebuilt. The album went to #1 on the classical crossover charts and crossed over to the main charts, peaking at number 15. The single Phoenix Rising hit the top 40 on mainstream radio. I was nominated for a New Artist Grammy. I didn't win, but I was there at the Grammys, performing on that stage in front of millions. I wore a golden dress that made me look like the phoenix I'd named myself after. And I sang my heart out, knowing that somewhere my parents were watching, seeing what they'd missed, understanding finally what they'd lost. After the Grammys, Marcus told me my parents had tried to contact him, had asked if they could reconcile, had wanted tickets to my shows. I told him the same thing I'd told every other person who'd reached out on their behalf. No, that door is closed. Some people thought I was being cruel, unforgiving, harsh. They said everyone makes mistakes, that family is important, that I should give them another chance. But I'd given them 2 entire lifetimes. I'd given them my first life completely. Let them break me. Let them use me. Let them discard me. I'd given them chances in my second life too. Every time I'd competed, performed, and achieved, I'd given them the chance to see me, to choose me, to be better. They'd failed every time. I didn't owe them another chance. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I didn't owe them anything. What I owed was to the girl I'd been in my first life, the girl who died small and sad and convinced she was worthless. I owed her this success, this happiness, this proof that she'd been wrong about herself. She hadn't been worthless. She'd been extraordinary. She'd just been surrounded by people who couldn't see it. I'm 21 now, writing this from my apartment in New York. A real apartment with a view, not a basement or a studio, but a place that's mine, that I paid for with money I earned myself. My second album just went platinum. I'm about to start a world tour. I have a Grammy nomination for Best Pop Vocal Album. I have Mrs. Chen's photo on my mantle. She's retired now, but comes to every show in the city. I have Marcus as my manager and friend, the man who saw my potential when I was 15 and never stopped believing. I have a community of fellow musicians, fans, and supporters who lift me up. I have everything I dreamed of, everything I died without, everything my parents told me was impossible. And they have Emma. I know because the internet tells me things, even when I don't ask. Emma graduated from her conservatory with massive debt and mediocre prospects. She's teaching piano to children now, living in my parents' house, trying to make ends meet. My parents' house is in foreclosure. They can't afford the payments after spending everything on Emma's education that led nowhere. They've tried to contact me a few times over the years. There was a letter after my first album went platinum asking if I could help them financially. There was an email after Emma's engagement fell through suggesting we reconnect as a family. There was a message after my Grammy nomination, congratulating me and asking for tickets to the ceremony. I deleted all of them unread after the first few sentences. Some people think that makes me cold, but I think it makes me wise. I learned in my first life what happens when you keep giving to people who only take. I learned what it costs to keep hoping that people who hurt you will change. I learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. I think about my first life sometimes, the girl who begged for scraps, who died believing she wasn't enough, who never got to experience any of this. I think about her and I sing for her. Every performance, every song, every moment on stage is for both of us. The girl who didn't get a chance and the girl who took her second chance and ran with it. I think about the regional choir finals, the night my parents chose Emma's mediocre recital over my triumph. The night that broke me in my first life and freed me in my second. If I could go back and tell 15-year-old me, the me who watched them leave without a backward glance, what was coming, what I'd build from their absence, I'd tell her this: let them go to Emma's recital. Let them make their choice. Let them show you exactly who they are and what you mean to them. And then let yourself be free. Because the best revenge isn't making them sorry. The best revenge is being so spectacularly successful that their apologies don't matter anymore. The best revenge is building a life so full of love and achievement and joy that their absence is irrelevant. The best revenge is proving to yourself and to the world that you never needed them at all. I let my parents miss my choir concert. They never knew I got a record deal. And by the time they realized what they'd missed, I was already platinum, already Grammy nominated, already gone. I didn't need them to see me then. And I don't need them now. I am enough. I always was. And that's the truest revenge of all. Not making them suffer, but realizing I'm happy without them. I chose myself. And I won. There's a coda to this story, though. One last moment that brought everything full circle. Last month, I was performing at Carnegie Hall. The pinnacle, the dream, the venue every classical musician aspires to. Sold-out crowd, perfect acoustics, the performance of my life. I was in the dressing room before the show, doing my warm-ups, when there was a knock at the door. "Someone here to see you," my assistant said. "She says she's your sister." Emma stood in the hallway, looking smaller than I remembered. She was 24 now, lines of stress around her eyes. Her clothes nice but worn, she looked like what she was. A failed prodigy, a woman who'd peaked at 16 and had been declining ever since. "Sophie, she said, I know you don't want to see me. I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to tell you something before you go on stage." I should have turned her away, should have had security remove her, but something in her face stopped me, not pity exactly, but curiosity about what could have brought her here. "You have 3 minutes, I said. She nodded, took a breath. I'm sorry, I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I was complicit in what Mom and Dad did to you. I knew they favored me. I knew they were hurting you, and I let it happen because I benefited from it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking that you know I understand now what we did to you. What I did to you." "What changed?" I asked. "What made you suddenly develop a conscience?" "Therapy," she said with a bitter laugh. "And failure. Turns out when you're built up your whole life as special, and then the real world shows you that you're just average, it breaks something in you. I fell apart after graduation. Complete breakdown. Spent 6 months in treatment. And in therapy, I had to face what kind of person I'd been, what I'd allowed. You were right that night at your EP launch. About everything. I wasn't great. I was just enabled. And you were extraordinary despite everything." I studied her, looking for manipulation, for an angle. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "Why are you here, Emma?" "Because you're about to perform at Carnegie Hall and someone from your family should be here to see it. Someone should witness you achieving the dream. And since Mom and Dad are too proud and too broke to come, and since you hate all of us anyway, I thought maybe I could at least bear witness. Even if you don't want me to. Even if you throw me out. I wanted you to know that someone from your family knows what you've accomplished. Someone sees you now, even though we didn't then." She pulled out a ticket from her purse. I bought this seat 6 months ago as soon as they went on sale. Back row, nosebleeds cost me a week's pay. But I'll leave right now if you want. I won't stay if it'll ruin this night for you. Just know that I'm sorry. And I'm proud of you. And you deserved better than what we gave you. I looked at this woman who'd been my sister, my rival, my tormentor, and I felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no desire for revenge. Just a kind of distant, neutral peace. You can stay, I said, but Emma, this doesn't make us family again. This doesn't undo anything. This is just you witnessing the consequences of your choices. You in the nosebleeds because that's what you can afford. Me on the Carnegie Hall stage because I earned it alone. That's the price of how you treated me. You get to watch me triumph from the worst seat in the house, and you get to live with knowing you could have been part of this if you'd been a better sister. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, I understand. Thank you for letting me stay. She left, and I finished my warm-up alone. My assistant knocked again. 5 minutes, Sophie. I stood, smoothed my dress, a custom gown, emerald like the one I'd worn to the regional finals, but couture this time, designer, expensive, and looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about 15-year-old me singing her heart out to an audience that didn't include her parents. I thought about the girl who'd died sad and small. I thought about the woman I'd become, strong and free. This one's for us, I whispered to my reflection. Then I walked out onto the Carnegie Hall stage, into the lights, into the thunder of applause, and I sang like the phoenix I was, risen from ashes, reborn in fire, unbreakable and free. Emma was in the back row, just another face in the crowd. My parents were home, watching their mistakes compound, watching their golden child teach piano lessons, watching their rejected daughter soar. And I was center stage at Carnegie Hall, living the dream they said was impossible. I chose myself, and in the end, that choice gave me everything.